let's talk some more Kendall Roy. So in the last video, we talked about his progression through season 3. Now we're going to talk a bit more about his progression through season 4 and some of the things that he carries on from season 3 and some of the things that he leaves behind. And there's a big event that happens in season 4. Major spoilers ahead, so go and watch it if you haven't. So Logan Roy, his father, dies. And this completely shapes up the dynamic. I think it's a very genius move by Jesse Armstrong to make Logan die of natural causes rather than being defeated by any one of the siblings. One of the most important symbols that kind of sprouts from this event is that Logan Roy's presence continues to linger even after his death in different ways, shapes and forms. So you have the video of him at the Living Plus presentation. You have the testament that he gives, that is written down, and all the siblings are arguing about it, about what it means. And there's so many other ways, a lot of symbols that appear in the show that kind of hint that he's still pulling the strings even after his death. It's kind of juxtaposed with this idea that death is final and the siblings can't handle that. And the Living Plus presentation is kind of an argument against that, of the siblings trying to take control over that, the idea of death. They're trying to make people live forever. And that's the idea that Kendall is trying to sell. I think that's a very important motive to keep in mind. Let's first talk actually about what his father's presence did to him before his death. So Kendall, just imagine you're Kendall. As a kid, you're told you're going to inherit this massive media conglomerate, and you're basically the chosen one, right? You've been promised this amazing life, essentially Valhalla, but for rich kids. And Kendall keeps this in mind, and he feels that he is entitled to the corporate throne, but he also wants his father's love. So those two things often get mixed up with one another. And there's actually another motivation that Kendall has, which is to try and be a good person, right? You could say that this is like a justification for trying to gain power, as he does in season 3. But it's still, I think it's separate from him trying to gain validation and love from his father and trying to inherit the CEO position and all the things that comes along with. But when his father dies, all these things collapse into one because he doesn't need validation from his father anymore. There's no reason for him to fight the good fight because there's no antagonist to really bring down anymore. So he's the forefront of the company, so he needs to represent them. And you see in season 4, he lets go of all those values because they don't mean anything anymore. They don't serve any purpose anymore. And he becomes very hypocritical. A lot of things fall into place for him to start supporting Mencken, who's a right-wing fascist. But I think that he really has a choice then, either to back Mencken or to go an alternative route. This kind of all ties into, him starting to pay homage to the systems of power. And this is something Logan always did. He didn't care. He didn't really think about how his actions were affecting the world as a whole. He's just thinking about his own position. Obviously, he wants stability, as the siblings said, but he would always prioritize his own standing, the success of Waystar Royco above anything else. He will step over you. And he grew up in that dog-eat-dog world where that was the standard. There was no win-win situations. It was, if you wanted to succeed, you need to stab your friends in the back with a knife. And he encapsulates this in this scene with what he says.
Life's not knights on horseback. It's a number on a piece of paper. It's a fight for a knife in the mud.
The next thing I want to bring to your attention is the fact that Kendall suffers a defeat without suffering a defeat. And this is very important because in prior seasons, whenever he suffers a defeat, he starts to be more clear because he's working from a place, he's working from rock bottom, and you can't get lower than rock bottom. In season 2, when he was, a shell of a man, he was actually making the best speeches and he was making really good moves. And then season 3, that he throws a steel ball, a lot of that lingering anxiety that he has, that need to continue winning, to continue pulling rabbits out of the hat, that eventually ruins him. But in season 4, he's defeated because his father dies. But for the first time, it doesn't actually worsen his own position if you think of it purely in terms of ability to gain status and power, which is very superficial, but that's how all the Roys are thinking. And this is the lens that the audience sees through. We're all looking at it in terms of who's going to win, who's going to succeed the throne. And Kendall's getting closer to that. But something important happens, which is that he doesn't get too cocky. He doesn't get too confident because of this thing that has happened to him. He starts to be more resilient. He starts to become unreadable. He doesn't, try and chase every single win that he sees. And he starts to lock in. So that's very important. That's very important. Next, I want to draw your attention to some of the ways that Kendall carries on the flaws that he had in season 3. He isn't able to ascend all of his flaws, and it's like this short time frame that he has. It's only season 4 spans over probably a week, something like that. The funeral is like a week after Logan's death. I want to draw attention to a term called narcissistic injury, and you can read about it in this article, which basically talks about it in relation to Kendall Roy and how his narcissism was born from the upbringing that he had, and how this means that his ego is very fragile. He tries to overcompensate in terms of achievement and success, and also something that a lot of people nowadays suffer with, which is exceptionalism. You could say they suffer with it, but it really is a cause of suffering, especially in terms of like Buddhist perspectives. So what exceptionalism basically is that your belief that you are better than everyone else, or that you're special in some way or another. And even people who aren't as rich as Kendall nowadays suffer with this because they feel they have to stand out on social media. They see everyone, celebrating their lives. They feel that they have to be special in some way or another to stand out and be noticed. And that's the same with Kendall, right? So he grew up as a rich kid. In a lot of ways, his exceptionalism is dissimilar to ordinary people's exceptionalism, because he was born with the belief that he was destined to be a CEO, which I don't think many of the audience can relate to. This sense of exceptionalism is exaggerated by the scene where Kendall comes across the piece of paper, the testament by Logan Roy, which states that Kendall should be the next CEO. And as the sibling said, it's basically moot. But what's important about this is the psychological effect it has on Kendall. Really pay attention to the psychological effect it has on Kendall, because Jeremy Strong has noted this scene in particular in how it affects Kendall. This is probably one of the most pivotal scenes in season 4, because it is bringing him back from that dormant state that he was in. Prior seasons, he was suffering defeat after defeat after defeat, And that testament was too hard for him to ignore, because if he ignored it, it would mean he was incapable, or that he was a disappointment to himself and he didn't have any inherent worth. That's what it means to him. What a healthy person would look at that document and say is that it's just another piece of information, maybe something that reflects his dad's changing moods, which was typical of him. But Kendall sees it as a call to destiny, and that's why he can't ignore it. He wants to be brought back into the loop again, because this is his final chance, right? And that's part of the reason why he's so set on trying to achieve this outcome, this specific narrow vision that he has of success. And kind of he has to sustain certain delusions in order to justify it. So I can show you this scene with him and Rava.
You know, you have no idea the things I'm doing, the things I'm working on. 6 continents, okay? I'm breaking my back, and it's all for them, okay? To make the world safe.
Point is that he's still trying to delude himself and justify to himself what he's doing. He still needs to do that. He still needs to feel like he's a good person. And he asks Shiv, am I a good father? He's asking her. And he's like, maybe the poison drips through, which is an incredible quote. So the good thing is that he is kind of self-aware of this. He's self-aware of the delusions that he has. But he just can't overcome it. You need the metacognition. You need the strength of character to really overcome something. Self-awareness isn't enough. I think that's... Kendall Roy is a case in point of that. But yeah, that's another thing that he kind of carries on from season 3. And one of the reasons why he doesn't succeed, because he can succeed in a number of domains. I think outside of like this little toxic environment, Kendall Roy has like business skills, analytical skills, people skills. He's just too caught up in this one narrow vision of success, which is to become Waystar Broker's CEO and savior. Anyways, thanks for watching, and like and subscribe. See you next time.